You're listening to the CyberWire Network, powered by N2K.
As business and innovation come together, digital transformation isn't a future concept. It's happening right now. As industrial organizations modernize their infrastructure, it introduces new cyber risks, but also offers a unique opportunity to instrument OT for improved cybersecurity and operational resilience. Join me and my friends from AWS, Splunk, and Dragos on August 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time for a live panel on securing digital transformation, OT cybersecurity innovation and resilience, where we'll dive into secure digital transformation, managing OT and IT cyber risk, and the value and vision of cloud resources. For more information about the webinar and to register for the live event, visit thecyberwire.com/Dragos or see our show notes for details. Meet Mimecast. They're in the business of taking companies at risk of cyber attack and putting them at ease. Picture this. It's Monday morning. You're cruising through hundreds of unread emails. Your impulse to promptly click, download, or respond could be a prompt to launch a cyber attack. An email address is a direct digital path to the mind, the machine, and the data of every person in your organization. It needs better security. I know what you're thinking. I'm all set. I have Microsoft 365 protection, Dave. It might not be enough. That's where Mimecast comes in. They've developed a system that fortifies your email security and reduces costs, risks, and complexities, enabling you and your business to work protected. So before you click your next email, visit mimecast.com to start your free 30-day trial. The U.S. issues a national cyber workforce and education strategy, hunting Chinese malware staged in U.S. networks. CISA warns of a Barracuda backdoor. WikiLoader malware is discovered. P2P Infect is a malware botnet targeting publicly accessible Redis servers. Johannes Ullrich from SANS describes attacks against YouTube content creators. Rick Howard previews his conversation with AWS Ciso CJ Moses. And Russia's SVR continues cyberespionage against Ukrainian and European diplomatic services. I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire Intel briefing for Monday, July 31st, 2023. As anticipated, the White House, through the Office of the National Cyber Director, released the National Cyber Workforce and Education Strategy early this morning. The plan builds on the National Cybersecurity Strategy released on March 1st of this year. It's an ambitious whole-of-nation effort. A number of agencies have been given specific roles and missions, and the strategy includes a long and heterogeneous list of private sector partners. The strategy isn't confined to educating Americans for jobs in the cybersecurity workforce. One of its objectives is to raise cybersecurity awareness and basic skills among the population at large. The motivation for this aspect of the strategy is the pervasiveness of activity in cyberspace, in commerce, and other aspects of daily life. The document charts a course for preparing Americans for today's jobs and enables everyone to participate fully in our interconnected society. The strategy represents a mix of the genuinely strategic, large-scale, enduring objectives with a general approach to achieving them, and the highly specific, that is, the low-level tactical work particular agencies will undertake to support the strategy. The strategy outlines 3 guiding imperatives. First, leveraging adaptable ecosystems to effect change at scale. Second, enabling the lifelong development of cyber skills. And last, growing and enhancing the cyber workforce through improving its diversity and inclusion. It's worth noting that the educational component of the strategy concentrates on regional universities and community colleges, which have long formed a significant fraction of federally sponsored cybersecurity centers of excellence. On Saturday, the New York Times, citing unnamed administration officials, reported that the U.S. was hunting for disruptive Chinese malware that's been quietly staged in U.S. systems. The Times report is the result of interviews conducted over the past 2 months. The consensus among both government and industry experts is that Volt Typhoon precedes Microsoft's report by at least a year. Investigation has shown that the Chinese campaign is more widespread than initially believed, and that the U.S. work to find and eradicate the malware has been in progress for some time. The infestation extends beyond telecommunication systems and is geographically global, but there do seem to be higher concentrations of the malware in the vicinity of U.S. military installations. Observers speculate that China is hedging against any U.S. intervention in a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. The Times reports that there's disagreement within the administration as to whether the malware is designed narrowly to cripple U.S. military operations or whether wider spread disruption of U.S. society would be the goal. In any case, the U.S. government is said to regard the apparent shift from collection to disruption as both significant and disturbing. The U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency recently released 3 malware analysis reports concerning malware variants exploiting the CVE 2023-2668 vulnerability. This vulnerability affects Barracuda email security gateways and allows for remote command injection. According to Bleeping Computers report, one of the identified malware strains, named Submarine, has been attributed to the suspected Chinese threat actor UNC 4841. CISA's analysis provides insights into the characteristics of the malware, indicating that it is specifically designed for persistence and lateral propagation. The alert highlights that Submarine operates as a persistent backdoor, executing with root privileges, and resides within an SQL database on the ESG appliance. The malware encompasses multiple components, such as a SQL trigger, shell scripts, and a loaded Linux daemon library, which collectively enable various functionalities, including execution with root privileges, persistence, command and control capabilities, and cleanup. Additionally, CISA examined artifacts associated with Submarine containing contents from the compromised SQL database. The agency warns that this malware presents a significant threat for lateral movement, emphasizing its potential to spread within affected systems. Researchers at Proofpoint this morning described a new strain of commodity malware they've dubbed WikiLoader. The malware has been active since at least December 2022. Proofpoint calls WikiLoader sophisticated and designed for staging secondary payloads. It's evasive, and both detection and analysis have proven challenging. It's positioned in the criminal-to-criminal market as a rental, one that's used by several threat actors, and Proofpoint expects WikiLoader to find customers among the initial access brokers. Cato Security Labs reports a new malware campaign targeting publicly accessible deployments of the Redis data store. The malware, P2P Infect, is written in Rust and is designed for botnet creation. P2P Infect gains initial access by exploiting the Redis replication feature. The researchers explain, replication allows instances of Redis to be run in a distributed manner, in what's referred to as a leader-follower topology. This allows follower nodes to act as exact replicas of the leader, providing high availability and failover for the data store. After initial infection, the malware drops a payload which renames wget and cure, probably in an attempt to slow down incident response. As its name suggests, P2P Infect then creates a peer-to-peer botnet in which each infected server serves as a single node. Cato explains that this allows the entire botnet to gossip with each other without using a centralized C2 server. It is assumed that commands are issued by propagating signed messages across the network. The malware also includes a worming feature that works to propagate the infection to new servers. In researching a version of the malware specifically geared toward Windows, researchers at Palo Alto Network's Unit 42, who've also looked at P2P infect, have concluded that a crypto mining payload was not included in the malware. Unit 42 wrote, "There are instances of the word miner within the malicious toolkit of P2P infect. However, researchers did not find any definitive evidence that crypto mining operations ever occurred." Recorded Future's Insikt Group is tracking a cyberespionage campaign against diplomatic services that Russia's SVR ran between February and June of this year. The researchers don't have a great deal of direct insight into the target's environment, but their reasonable conjecture is that the operation has reflected Russia's continued interest in European governments, especially their diplomats. As is commonly the case, the attack begins with spear phishing, the fish bait being such lures as an ambassador's schedule, an invitation to an embassy reception, or, in a case we've seen before, an ad for a used BMW. The message redirects to a compromised domain from which Blue Bravo, as Recorded Future calls the SVR threat actor, installs malware that gives it persistence in the target's network. Blue Bravo has cycled through at least 3 major tools this year. The one most recently used, the researchers called Graphical Proton, a loader that's staged in an ISO or zip file. Graphical Proton exploits legitimate services, especially Microsoft OneDrive, for delivery to the target. And so, the cyber activity in Russia's hybrid war seems to have contracted to familiar espionage, with a big side helping of disinformation. Coming up after the break, Johannes Ullrich from SANS describes attacks against YouTube content creators. Rick Howard previews his conversation with AWS Ciso CJ Moses. Stay with us. Struggling to secure on-prem apps with modern identity? Don't worry, you're not alone. Join industry leaders from Fortune 500 organizations to secure your apps on any cloud with any IDP, regardless of your environment's complexity. Meet Strata's identity orchestration platform, Mavericks. Say goodbye to the headaches of app refactoring and legacy tech debt. With identity orchestration, you can modernize legacy apps to use MFA or passwordless authentication in a few weeks, migrate from one IDP to another, and so much more without changing the app. No matter your IAM use case, Strata extends the value of your current identity investments. And the best part? You can try it for free today. Visit strata.io/cyberwire to share your biggest identity challenge, and they'll hook you up with a complimentary pair of AirPods Pro. Don't miss out. Visit strata.io/cyberwire. That's strata.io/cyberwire. And now, a word from our sponsor, Halcyon. Ransomware is still one of the largest threats facing businesses in 2023. The Halcyon platform was built to stop it through a multi-layered protection approach featuring full encryption key capture, automated decryption, and the ability to prevent other security tools on the endpoint from being unhooked. Learn more about how they're leveraging Capsule network-based machine learning to reduce ransomware recovery times down to minutes by visiting halcyon.ai. And it is always my pleasure to welcome back to the show Rick Howard. He is the CyberWire's Chief Security Officer, also our Chief Analyst, and he is the host of the CSO Perspectives podcast. Rick, over this summer, you have been quite busy. Of course, you've done a little bit of vacation time. You've done some some internal N2K cybersecurity work, but you've also been doing some company travel. You went out to California and spoke at the annual Google Sales Conference. You keynoted at the Rocky Mountain Information Security Conference in Denver, and then you went back out to Anaheim, California, and you covered the AWS reInvent conference to see what the latest developments were in AWS security. And now you're back, and you're releasing a new episode of the CSO Perspectives podcast. So, first of all, welcome back. And second, what do you have in store for us in this new season of CSO Perspectives?
Well, thanks, Dave. It's great to be back in the saddle again. And for this episode of CSO Perspectives, I'm taking advantage of that opportunity I got while attending the AWS reInvent conference. Besides the trip that our mutual producer, Jen Iben, and I made to Disneyland for one magical evening, and we should do an entire show just to talk about that escapade. I have stories, Dave. I'm just saying. All right. I got to sit down with the AWS Ciso CJ Moses. Now, CJ got his start in the U.S. Air Force back in the late 1990s, working for the Office of Special Investigations as a computer crime investigator, chasing hackers around the world back when the internet was still the wild, wild west. He worked for the FBI and MITRE doing cyber stuff as a civilian, and then, in 2010, he took a job at Amazon and worked his way up the ladder and eventually became the AWS CISO 2 years ago. And Dave, I get to talk to a lot of CISOs in this job, but CJ is a special case. If AWS was its own company and not owned by Amazon, it would be a Fortune 500 company in its own right with $58.7 billion in revenue in 2022, slightly below Morgan Stanley and slightly above Tesla. So CJ, obviously has a huge job, not only protecting the internal AWS environments, but also protecting all of the environments that most of us as customers use while deploying the service. And of course, he spends a lot of time thinking about strategy and tactics. And since I just published a book on cybersecurity strategies and tactics, we had a rollicking conversation about what that means at AWS.
Can you give us an example?
Well, in my book, I include an entire chapter on resiliency as a strategy and the tactics you might need to pursue that strategy. But CJ's great insight is that traditional resiliency is about ensuring that your data and systems are always available. If there's an availability issue, you can't get to those resources for whatever reason. They exist, there's just some technical issue preventing access. But CJ says that durability is a more important adjective for resiliency. It means that without durability, not only can you not get to your data and systems, they are no longer there. You'll never be able to get access because they're gone. And I wish I had that little bit of insight when I wrote that chapter in my book. That is some really interesting ideas.
It reminds me of what a friend of mine used to describe. He was a commercial insurance agent, and he would often invoke the vision of he called it a Wile E. Coyote smoking hole in the ground.
I love the metaphor.
Well, before I let you go, what is the phrase of the day over on your Word Notes podcast this week?
Well, you're going to laugh, Dave, but this week's phrase is Apple's iCloud keychain. And before we did the episode, I thought I knew what that was, but it turns out I didn't. Did you know that Apple considers that a password manager similar to LastPass and 1Password? I didn't know that. Okay, I guess I should have known that, but how did that pass me by? I don't know. So anybody in the audience, if you're like me, download this episode and get some education because I definitely did not know that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I think there's a lot of functionality built into iCloud Keychain that's kind of hidden and people just don't know about it. And I don't know if that's Apple not doing a great job of promoting it or what, but I'll be looking forward to tuning in and finding out what you have to say about it. As always, Rick Howard, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
And joining me once again is Johannes Ullrich. He is the Dean of Research at the SANS Technology Institute and also the host of the ISC Stormcast podcast. Johannes, it's always great to have you back. I know something you have had your eye on are threat actors targeting YouTube content creators. What's going on here?
Yeah, so what we observed, we have written about like a few months ago, was that relatively popular YouTube accounts with sometimes millions of followers were compromised and then used for crypto coin scams. The scams are all pretty much the same. They have a fake video of Elon Musk advertising some kind of giveaway or such to trick people to send them crypto coins. But what you really didn't sort of know is how did they get access to these accounts? And a little bit of breakthrough came there. I think it was 2 months ago or a month ago. Linus Tech Tips, which is like one of the big tech YouTube channels, was compromised by just one of those scams. And they talked a little bit about how it happened. So this helped us actually to then do some more targeted searches for the attack, which turned out to be spear phishing. And they're in particular going after these creators by basically sending them fairly well done fake sponsorship offers. So first of all, they appear to come from companies that are well known to sponsor many YouTube channels, like, for example, in this case that we had NordVPN. Again, it's not coming actually from NordVPN. It just claims to come from NordVPN. And the attacker went so far as to registering a special domain, nordvpn-media.com. So a very plausible domain where a media contact for NordVPN would use that to send email from, and then it had the usual PDF attachment and something that you may expect, some documents, some more details about how to get in contact and what they're willing to pay or what their rules are or whatever. And that PDF then led to malware. There was a link in the PDF. Once clicked, you download malware. They claimed it was additional documentation about how to sign up for their sponsorship offer, but it actually contained an info stealer, meaning something that collects credentials, in particular then, of course, things like YouTube logins and such.
I see. At the risk of blaming the victim here, I mean, do the folks who've been hit by this, do they have multi-factor authentication enabled?
They do. And that's actually something that Linus in his sort of post-mortem of the incident talked about. They do have two-factor authentication enabled, but and you probably do similar things where you have your automatic pipeline that processes your audio and then some kind of API key that's being used to upload the audio. And that API key, actually, particularly with YouTube, it's not where you can easily limit it to just allow video uploads. But once they have that API key, they have full access to your account. And that, of course, then is then used to change passwords and basically take over the account.
So basically, once they have access to your system, they're taking advantage of the API to get to your YouTube channel and its credentials.
Correct. Like, often whatever software you're using to produce the audio, first time you set it up to connect to YouTube, you basically set up these API keys. Really, only help is here to keep those systems maybe a little more isolated, where if you're running some malware on your desktop, it doesn't have access to those API keys. But that's, of course, a larger production to really set it up correctly and still have a fast, functional system to actually publish all of your content.
Is there any sense for how helpful YouTube is being with trying to get these accounts back?
And that's another problem here, that YouTube is not that terribly helpful. If you're Linus Tech Tips, who is like one of their top creators, yes, they got some help, but I think it even took them half a day kind of to get everything straightened out. If you are a lesser creator with merely like 1 or 2 million subscribers, then
only a couple million,
only a couple million subscribers, then you may have a much harder time to get through to YouTube. The other problem is that these API keys, the way they should be done is that they have very specific permissions to prevent sort of this complete account takeover if you are getting a hold of one of those API keys. But of course, that's always hard to change. Then in hindsight, if you're now limiting these credentials, then of course, all kinds of processes that people set up will break.
In the post-mortem, as you say, from the folks who run Linux Tech Tips, what changes have they made?
I believe they said that they basically are monitoring those keys more closely. Another important part here is also, we always talk about backups, but one thing the attacker did here was delete all of the videos.
Oh, wow.
So actually, one of the major delays in getting everything back together was just the sheer time it takes to upload all of these videos.
Yeah. All right. Boy, it's an interesting cautionary tale. Johannes Ullrich, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
There's nothing worse than relying on a legacy SIM that your security team has outgrown, especially when it impacts your ability to detect real incidents. Hunter's SOC platform offers built-in, always up-to-date detection rules and automatic correlation that allows SOC analysts to focus on higher-value tasks that impact your organization. It's time to move to a platform that reduces risk, complexity, and cost for the SOC. It's time to replace your SIM. Learn more by visiting hunters.security today. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. Don't forget to check out the Grumpy Old Geeks podcast. I join Jason and Brian on their show for a lively discussion of the latest security news every week. You can find Grumpy Old Geeks where all the fine podcasts are listed. We'd love to know what you think of this podcast. You can email us at cyberwire@n2k.com. Your feedback helps us ensure we're delivering the information and insights that help keep you a step ahead in the rapidly changing world of cybersecurity. We're privileged that N2K and podcasts like the CyberWire are part of the daily intelligence routine of many of the most influential leaders and operators in the public and private sector, as well as the critical security teams supporting the Fortune 500 and many of the world's preeminent intelligence and law enforcement agencies. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. This episode was produced by Liz Irvin and senior producer Jennifer Iben. Our mixer is Trey Hester, with original music by Elliot Peltzman. The show was written by our editorial staff. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Compliance isn't fun, but neither is a data breach or losing a customer. That's why Drata automated it. With automated evidence collection, over 80 integrations, and 24-hour monitoring, Drata automates the compliance process and keeps you audit-ready year-round. Drata supports over 14 frameworks, including SOC 2, GDPR, HIPAA, and ISO 27001. With over 450 five-star reviews, Drata is the highest-rated cloud compliance platform on G2. Listeners of the CyberWire Daily can get 10% off Drata and waived implementation fees at drata.com/partner/cyberwire.